I thought I knew how my life would turn out. I had a boyfriend I loved, dreams we built together, and the certainty that nothing could break us. But one evening, my family shattered that illusion. They didn't just choose my husband, they chose my boyfriend's own brother. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel, thank you. My name is Alina, and I am 24 years old. People often think your 20s are when you finally take control of your life, when you start making your own choices, building your own future. But in my world, choices were rarely mine to make. I grew up in a family where decisions weren't discussed, they were announced. Love was something you didn't chase. It was something arranged, wrapped neatly in family agreements and sealed with social expectations. I learned early that wanting something different was not only frowned upon, it was dangerous. But even in such a world, I found a way to carve out a secret corner of happiness for myself. For the past 2 years that secret had a name: Arav. He was my escape from the suffocating formality of my life. With him, I could laugh too loudly, speak too freely, and dream too wildly. He wasn't just my boyfriend. He was my reminder that I was still alive. The irony is, I always believed that our love was safe as long as it stayed hidden. My parents didn't know, his family didn't know. We were careful, almost obsessively so. We built our relationship like a delicate house of glass, transparent to us, but invisible to everyone else. Looking back, I realize now how foolish that confidence was. I thought our secrecy made us untouchable. I thought that if the world didn't see us, it couldn't touch us. I didn't know that the blow that would destroy us wouldn't come from strangers. It would come from the very people we were trying to protect ourselves from. And it all began with a single evening in December. For 2 years, Arav and I lived inside a carefully constructed bubble. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. We met in quiet corners of the city, small cafes where the waiters knew us but never asked questions, parks where we could walk close enough to touch without drawing attention. Every meeting was a stolen moment. Every touch a secret we carried like treasure. I used to think of our relationship as a secret garden. The outside world was filled with rules, gossip, and eyes that judged too quickly. But inside, it was just us, soft laughter over cups of coffee, whispered promises during late-night calls, dreams about the home we'd one day build. The danger was part of the thrill. We knew the risks, but neither of us thought about the consequences too much. After all, how could two people so careful, so hidden be found out? We had rules. Never appear together at family events. Never mention each other's names to friends who might talk. Never take pictures that could be traced. We moved through life like shadows, always close enough to feel each other's warmth, but never fully visible to anyone else. And yet, even with all those rules, I allowed myself to imagine a day when we wouldn't need them anymore. I pictured sitting across from my parents, telling them about the man I loved, and seeing their approval. I pictured standing beside Arav in front of both our families, not as a secret, but as a choice. It's strange how life works. The very thing I feared most, our families finding out, did happen. But not in the way I had ever prepared for. Because when our secret finally came into the light, it wasn't to bring us together. It was to pull us apart. It was a cold December evening when everything began to shift. The air outside was heavy with the kind of stillness that only winter brings, but inside our home, there was an unusual energy. My parents' voices carried through the hallway, low, excited murmurs, before they called me into the living room. They were seated together on the sofa, their faces glowing with the kind of satisfaction that only comes when something important has been decided. I knew that look well. It was the look they wore when they had something planned for me. I sat down, my heart thudding. They spoke of a proposal from a good family, a name spoken with respect and admiration. I felt the familiar unease rise in my chest. Arranged marriage had always been a shadow in the corner of my life, one I had successfully ignored until now. They described the family as respectable, established, and well-connected. A perfect match, they said. I listened, trying to keep my face neutral, but every word tightened the knot in my stomach. I had no interest in meeting anyone, because my heart was already taken. And then they said the last name. It was Arav's last name. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My thoughts stumbled over themselves, searching for reason. Could it be him? Could fate have worked in our favor? But then, as if to crush that fragile hope, they spoke another name: Karen. Arav's brother. Their voices were filled with pride as they spoke of him. Responsible. Successful. Exactly the kind of man they'd always wanted for me. To them this was perfect. To me it was the beginning of a nightmare I didn't know how to escape. For a few heartbeats, I clung to the fragile thought that maybe this could work in our favor, maybe Arav and I could finally be together with our family's blessing. But the moment Karen's name was spoken, that hope cracked like glass. Karen. The older brother. The one I had seen a handful of times at family events, always polite but distant. He was everything my parents valued: disciplined, financially secure, respected in the community. In their eyes he was a safe choice. In my eyes, he was the one person whose existence could destroy everything Arav and I had built. They spoke about him with a kind of admiration I had never heard in their voices for anyone else. How he was already settled in his career, how he was known for his integrity, how marrying into his family would strengthen our own ties. It was as if the universe had conspired to choose the one man who stood directly between me and the life I wanted. I kept my expression calm, my voice measured, but inside my mind was spinning. I imagined Arav's reaction, the betrayal he would feel, not from me, but from a fate so twisted it almost felt cruel. And what about Karen? He had no idea about us. How could he? To him, I was just another potential bride his family had chosen for him to meet. I sat there, nodding at my parents' words, but each one felt like a nail being driven into the coffin of my secret love. This wasn't just an obstacle. It was an impossible choice, between my family's honor and my own heart. Somewhere deep inside, I felt the walls closing in, and I knew that from this moment forward, every step I took would be a step toward breaking someone's heart. Maybe even my own. That night, the house was quiet, but my mind was loud. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of something I couldn't name pressing against my chest. Every word from earlier replayed in my head, my parents' excitement, Karen's name, the way they spoke as if this was already decided. Sleep refused to come. My thoughts wandered to Arav, picturing the way his smile curved when he saw me, the way his voice softened when he spoke about our future. How could I tell him this? How could I explain that the very people I had kept him hidden from were now unknowingly pulling us into the same orbit, only to place me in someone else's arms? I imagined Karen's face, the way I'd seen him at a distance during family occasions. He was courteous, calm, and serious. We had exchanged polite nods before, but nothing more. Now those brief, meaningless glances felt heavy with a future I didn't choose. I kept running through impossible scenarios in my head. Should I confess everything to my parents? Should I tell Karen before it went too far? Should I run to Arav and ask him to fight for us? Every option felt dangerous. Every path filled with consequences I wasn't ready to face. By the time the first hint of dawn crept through my curtains, I knew one thing for certain. This was no longer a secret I could keep buried. The truth was a ticking clock, and sooner or later, it was going to explode. The question was, who would it destroy first? The meeting was arranged before I had time to think of a way out. My parents called it a simple family dinner, but to me, it felt like the first step into a trap I couldn't escape. I dressed carefully, not because I wanted to impress, but because I knew every glance, every gesture would be studied. My hands trembled slightly as I fastened my earrings. I could almost feel Arav's absence, like a missing piece of myself that left me unbalanced. When I entered the room, Karen was already there. He rose to greet me, his posture straight, his expression calm, but his eyes, they lingered for a moment longer than necessary, as if searching for something unspoken. The dinner began politely. The family spoke about traditions, careers, and future plans. I nodded when expected, smiled when necessary, but inside I was somewhere else, wondering if Arav knew yet, wondering what he would feel if he could see his brother sitting across from me like this. Every so often, Karen's gaze would meet mine. It wasn't intrusive, but there was a subtle weight to it, as if he sensed a hesitation I was trying to hide. The more he looked at me, the more I feared he could see through the layers I had built to protect my secret. By the time the evening ended, I had learned nothing about what Karen truly thought of me, but I knew one thing: this was real now. It was no longer an idea my parents were discussing. The wheels were already turning, and I was being carried forward whether I wanted it or not. It happened sooner than I expected. 3 days after the dinner, my phone buzzed with Arav's name flashing on the screen. I almost didn't answer. I wasn't ready for this conversation, but something in me knew I couldn't avoid it any longer. His voice was tense from the moment I picked up. He didn't waste time on greetings. His family had told him about the marriage talks, speaking casually, as if it were just another family arrangement. They assumed he already knew. They assumed it wouldn't matter. For a moment, there was silence between us, heavy and suffocating. I could feel his anger, but it wasn't aimed at me. It was aimed at the cruel coincidence that had placed us here. His words came in short, clipped bursts, like he was fighting to stay calm. He asked me if it was true, if I was really going to marry Karen. I told him what I could, that I hadn't agreed, that I was trying to find a way out. But even as I said it, I could hear the defeat creeping into my own voice. The decision was slipping from my hands, and we both knew it. Arav's silence on the other end said more than words could. The man who used to speak of our future with such certainty now sounded like he was standing on the edge of losing it all. Before we hung up, he told me we needed to talk in person. His tone carried a weight I'd never heard before, part desperation, part resignation. When the call ended, I sat staring at my phone, my chest aching. In that moment, I realized the truth. This wasn't just about choosing between love and family anymore. This was about watching two brothers being set on a collision course. And knowing I was the reason. The days that followed felt like being trapped in quicksand. The more I struggled, the faster everything moved around me. My parents spoke constantly about the wedding, slipping into conversations about colors, venues, and guest lists as though the decision had already been made. Their joy was suffocating, each smile a reminder of the cage being built around me. Arav and I met in secret twice during that week. The first time he was restless, pacing back and forth, talking about confronting his family, and ending this before it went further. But the moment he considered what that might mean for his parents, his voice faltered. The second time, he was quieter, almost defeated. I could see it in his eyes. He was beginning to believe that no matter what we did, we couldn't stop this. Meanwhile, Karen began to appear more in my life, sometimes through casual messages, other times in short, polite visits with his family. He was kind and respectful, but I could feel a distance in him too, as if he wasn't entirely certain about me. Yet the more I looked at him, the more I feared what would happen if he ever learned the truth. Every move I made was watched by my parents, by relatives, by a future I hadn't chosen. The wedding plans accelerated without my consent, each detail sealing my fate a little tighter. I started counting the days, but instead of looking forward to anything, I was measuring the time I had left before everything I loved would be gone. It was becoming clearer with each passing moment. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about two families pushing toward a celebration, unaware that the union they were so proud of was built on a secret that could destroy them both. 1 week before the engagement, I stopped fighting. It wasn't that I didn't want to. It was that I couldn't see a way to fight without tearing everything apart. Every scenario I imagined ended in disaster. If I told my parents the truth, their pride would shatter, and the shame would ripple through the family like poison. If Arav confronted Karen, the bond between brothers could break beyond repair. And if I ran, well, running wasn't an option in a family like mine. The night I decided, I sat alone in my room with the lights off. My phone was in my hand, Arav's name glowing on the screen, but I didn't answer. I didn't know what to say anymore. How do you tell someone you love that you're choosing to walk into another man's life, not because you want to, but because you have no other path left? When I finally met Arav, it was in the park where we had shared so many stolen afternoons. He was sitting on the bench, hands clasped tightly together, his face shadowed in the fading light. I told him quietly, my voice shaking, that I would marry Karen. His reaction wasn't explosive. There were no angry words, no desperate pleas. Just a long, deep silence that seemed to swallow the air between us. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, stripped of all the warmth I knew. He only said that he understood. But the look in his eyes told me he didn't forgive me, and maybe never would. As I walked away from him that evening, I felt like I was leaving a part of myself behind. But I kept moving forward, because forward was the only direction left to go. The morning arrived wrapped in gold and noise. Music spilled through the streets, the scent of flowers filled the air, and relatives moved through the house in a blur of color. To them, it was a celebration. To me, it was a performance I had been rehearsing in silence for weeks. I sat in front of the mirror as the makeup artist worked, layering my face into something calm, beautiful, unshaken. But beneath the paint, my skin felt cold. My hands rested on my lap, fingers locked together so tightly that they ached. When I stepped into the wedding hall, everything was too bright, too loud. Guests smiled, cameras flashed, voices called my name. And then I saw him, Karen, standing at the altar waiting. His posture was steady, his eyes fixed on me. As I walked forward, I could feel the pull of every pair of eyes in the room, each step sealing the choice I had made. My heart beat hard, not from love, but from the weight of the truth I carried inside me. When I finally reached him, Karen took my hand. His grip was warm, steady. And then, just for a moment, his thumb moved against my palm in a way that felt deliberate, almost reassuring. I looked up, startled, and saw something in his gaze, an understanding that cut deeper than words. In that instant I knew. Maybe he didn't know everything, but he knew enough. And instead of pulling away, he was standing here, choosing to go through with it. The vows were spoken, the rituals completed, and the hall erupted in cheers. But as the crowd celebrated, I stood beside my new husband, caught in the quiet realization that I was now bound to a man who might have been carrying his own secret all along. And I couldn't help but wonder, whose secret would destroy us first. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel, thank you.